Are you excited about learning how to be powerful, Mike?
Uh, no, honestly.
Okay. It's totally fair. Totally fair.
I am hesitant to discuss this book.
Yeah.
Yep.
I will say that after I read the preface to this book, I understand why there is such division around this particular book and why there's like competing sides and a lot of conflict around it. So
Sure.
I'm like super excited to cover this with you. For probably a lot of the same reasons that you are not excited to cover this one with me.
Sure.
Just the way it goes. So I think it'll be fun.
The
But
entire time I was reading this one, I had the scene from Pinky and the Brain playing in my head. What are we going
yes.
to do tomorrow night, Brain? Same
Yep.
thing we do every night. Try to take over the world.
Yep. So this'll be interesting because you're not wrong on that at all. It will be entertaining to say the least. So we got some follow up here. You have the focus course as number one on this list.
Yeah, this isn't actually follow up, but I do want to announce to all the Bookworm listeners that I will be part of the Focus Course Academy that's going to be coming out in January. The January cohort, I will be presenting one of the workshops on PKM. So the Focus Course is run by my friend Sean Blanc. I've worked with Blanc Media for a long time. Sean told me at one point that I was the first person to actually buy the Focus Course back in the day.
I didn't know that. Good job.
Yeah, it's a great course, and it says it's exactly what it says on the tin. So if you feel like you've always wanted to check out the Focus Course, but you haven't yet, this January cohort would be a great time to do it because I will be a part of it. I don't know who the other speakers are, but there's a couple other workshops that'll be a part of it as well. And the URL that you can go to for this, which I think it opens up after we record, but before this releases, it'll be just thefocuscourse.com, and it'll show the Focus Academy once it's ready to go. But yeah, it's 4 weeks long, and it's a lot of fun. I've been a part of these as a member of the Blanc Media team. Now I get to participate as a workshop leader, I guess. And if anyone wants to go through it with me, that'd be cool.
Yeah, there you go. Super exciting. Good job. Do good. Some other follow up here. I've got 3 items on my list, and I made progress on all of them. Attempted one of them twice that I said I was going to do once. That one was scheduled my week ahead of time. So the idea here is to think about the week coming up and then plan out when certain tasks are going to happen. And I did this. It took a lot longer than I thought it would. So I did it on week 1. And by day 2, so on Tuesday, it had completely fallen apart. And then the entire week needed redone. And some of that was out of my control. Some of it was definitely my fault. I will absolutely take credit for some of it. Basically, what had happened is, we're end of year, so like we're neck deep in all the budgeting stuff for next year. And with tech, it tends to like flirt with all the other departments, it seems like. So you end up in a situation where I'm pulled into a lot of things and they don't necessarily know that they need me there until, last minute and we're in the middle of the meeting. So getting pulled into those meant that I had multiple hours that were yanked from my days that I absolutely was not planning for. So the fact that I had that happen told me that there's a lot more flexibility in my schedule day to day that I don't have. Or I guess there's a lack of flexibility and I don't know where that's going to be pulled. So that made it a bit tricky. So then week 2, meaning this particular week that we're working through right now, I decided to try it again, Mike, even though I told you I would try it for 1 week. And this particular week, I made an attempt to do that for the entire week, but only in the mornings till about 11 o'clock. And just kind of left the afternoon wherever it lies. Like that can either be buffer to catch up on the stuff I did not get done in the morning, or I can use that to get ahead for tomorrow, and just kind of leaving that open-ended. And that kind of coincided with one of my other action items, which was to map my week according to energy levels and types of work, knowing that a lot of my hard knowledge work is always done in the mornings, primarily before 11 o'clock. So that's why I was choosing to do that. So far, it's kind of been okay. Because some of why I did that was knowing that most of the time whenever I get pulled into things last minute, it's literally last minute, meaning in the end of the day. So somewhere between 2, 3, 3:30 or so is when a lot of that stuff will happen. Not always, but that's generally where it occurs. So I'm trying to like work around that particular component and knowing that I've got to be a little bit flexible at those times. It's been all right. It's been interesting to see what the ramifications of trying to plan your week ahead of time are and how difficult that is. And right now, what I'm trying to weigh is the payoff of planning this ahead of time compared to how much time it takes to do that. And is the amount of time I'm putting into building that plan worth the maybe mediocre gains on how much I'm getting done and the effectiveness of what I'm getting done? So I don't know that the payoff is there, but it does seem to work. And what I don't know is this something you need to do for a while in order to reap the benefits, or is there something fundamentally flawed in the logic with this process? So right now, I would say jury's out, unless you have an immediate, this is why, Joe, duh.
No,
You don't have that.
I did not have that. Yeah, scheduling your whole week ahead of time, I've never really done that to begin with because I felt my schedule was too fluid for that. And I've always done time blocking instead. So when you said time blocking was difficult, I kind of figured this wouldn't stick.
Yeah. These things rarely do, and yet I feel like I need to keep trying them. I don't know why that is. Seems like the thing I should do. Everybody tells me I should be doing it. But every time I try everything I possibly can to make it work, it like never works. I don't know if that's just a factor of my job or my brain. I don't know which one it is.
It's probably an 80-20 here for everybody, but specifically for you, I think that's where time blocking kind of was it for me. I know other people who do plan their entire week ahead of time, but I don't know exactly. I don't expect that part of it to really stick, but there's probably a version of this that clicks for you if you want to still explore it. I don't blame you if you decide, heck with it though.
At some point, I'm just like, I need to stop trying. Like I am learning that like I can pretty much nail down what tomorrow morning is going to look like. But if I try to nail down what tomorrow afternoon looks like and pick whatever day of the week you want, I don't really have a clean answer on what tomorrow afternoon is going to look like. And I sure don't know what the following day's morning is going to look like. Not cleanly.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm only ever about one day out of being able to make those types of plans. And I think that is primarily just the nature of how fast-paced things are with both my thinking and with the job that I hold. So between those two, I think it just makes it extremely difficult.
Yeah. Knowing tomorrow morning may be good enough.
Correct. Get the 2 or 3 things I know I absolutely have to get done that are super, high importance. Get those done and then try not to worry about the rest. That seems to be the cleanest way I can come at it, despite people telling me you need a time block, you need to, plan your things ahead of time, you need to blah, 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 blah. Don't do it. That's what I'm learning. Don't do it.
Well, I'm going to advocate for time blocking, but that's just me. What about these 8-week cycles? Maybe that's the
started.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this could be the sweet spot here, by the way, is like the 8-week cycles instead of the week, but then the time blocking. So you have like the long view and the short view.
Right. So I started this planning process for putting together basically 6 weeks of work, right? So then I've got a week of buffer and then a week to plan the next 8-week cycle. So I've been working through what the first 6 weeks of 2023 is going to look like specifically at work. I feel like that's the place I need to start with this. That's the cleanest area I can start on this. Going outside of that, I think it's going to get to be too much too fast. So trying to nail down what the first 6 weeks of January into February is going to look like for 2023 as far as work I'm doing with my assistant and with some of the volunteers here at the church. So knowing that process and working through it and seeing what projects are going to be on the front burner for that seems to be a good planning process at the moment. So again, Jury's out. Won't know until sometime in February how that goes. But that particular planning process is proving quite fruitful so far.
Nice.
So, how about you?
I have 2 action items. The first one was to consider my environments in my rituals. I can tell you that one thing that has happened with this is I have a routine of reading my Bible and praying every morning. And I have been using apps for this with the discipleship group that I lead at my church. There's a app called Echo that we use for like a group prayer request thing, which is kind of cool because when you're done, it can send notifications to people, be like, "Hey, so and so prayed for you," which is kind of fun to get. And then the other thing that we've been doing is going through YouVersion together with the shared Bible plan or Bible reading plans. So you could do like a chronological reading plan, and then at the end of the day, it says, "What did you get?" And there's a space for you to put your little comment. And it's kind of cool to see, like as you're reading it together, what people are getting. However, I don't like grabbing my phone first thing in the morning.
Yep. I wondered how that was going to go.
Yeah, it is. It is. This year, I am committing to changing the way that I do my morning Bible reading specifically, because that's the thing that I usually do right away in the morning, and I'm going to do it analog. I've already talked to my guys, and they're going to do it too. That I recognize that even if I am able to, which probably there's like a 75% success rate, like grab my phone and go directly to the thing that I was going to do with it. But still, there's the possibility there, and it just changes everything, even having that as a option in the morning, I feel. So that's one thing that has changed from this. But I haven't really done a whole lot else with it in terms of like, I'm going to do this thing in this place because it's better for this or anything. If I'm going to do anything with any amount of privacy or quiet, it has to be in my office.
Yep.
I could try to be in the bedroom with the door closed, but that's not very successful. It's still upstairs by everybody. So the actual place that things happen, like that, I have limited options there. So I think just getting that one change though is ultimately a win for that action item, but I don't think I'm completely done with it yet. I want to continue to kind of just think about that a little bit more. The other one I had was to document my weekly rhythms. This is harder than I thought it was going to be. Partially because my weekly rhythms are in large part dependent on what other people need. And before I can make a weekly rhythm that I can stick to, I need everybody else to establish their weekly rhythms and communicate them to me.
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't know if or when that will ever happen. So I have identified a couple things. I've identified, well, let me just back up a little bit. So I want to get into a regular writing rhythm. I want to write every single day. And one of the things that I have identified with this exercise is that Monday is the day that I will do the one-on-one with my kids. So I'll take one of them once a week. We'll go to a coffee shop, play games for an hour in the morning, something like that. And Monday is the day that works best to do that. So I have identified that Mondays, this isn't like a theme, but one of the things that's going to happen is Mondays are going to be the days that the one-on-one happens. So I'm probably going to have to pass on the writing for Monday unless it happens later on in the day, like after the day job stuff is done. The other thing I have identified is that we have with the day job, we call it Focus Fridays. So Fridays are really the day to really work on a project without any interruptions. And so by the time Friday comes around, I usually have very clear, like I need to finish up these things, and I have a little bit more flexibility on my Fridays because there's no meetings that I have to work around. So I've been thinking about how I could make Fridays my creative days, not theming like the entire day, but how could I do something a little bit extra on a Friday? Last week I tested just doing like over lunchtime a a Q&A in my circle community. So people join in live Zoom style thing and just chatted for a little bit. That was really fun. And I want to do more of that type of stuff. If I don't have a Zoom hangout sort of a thing, maybe it'll be when I record stuff for the YouTube videos. I have a lot of ideas that are percolating and I'm working on. So if I just have the space to regularly work on the videos, if I force myself to sit in the chair and actually record them, they don't take that long. Within an hour, I could get the raw footage done, and then it's up to me to delegate the next part of that because I'm still figuring out what is my brand, my vibe, all that kind of stuff, and then process that. So we'll make a process out of that so I can hand it off to somebody like Joshua or Toby to help me with some of the editing potentially. So yeah, that's kind of the thought process there. But other than that, haven't really identified a whole lot in terms of themes other than Tuesdays and Wednesdays seem to be all day meetings.
You like meetings. Good job. I know they're your
don't
favorite.
like meetings, but they're necessary and they don't have to suck. They're getting better.
They are getting better. So that tells me that currently they are not better. All right.
Well, they're better than they used to be. We're still making progress, but yeah.
Okay. I still remember the days when I would hop in my car at 5 till 6 in the morning, dial into my first meeting at 6 o'clock, and would be on the phone all day long until I hopped in the car to come home at somewhere around 4:15, and would be on a call until I made it home around 5, and then would sit in the garage with the car running. Well, maybe not necessarily with the car running, but would sit in the garage with my headset still on and finishing up my meeting at 5, and always wondering, it's like, why? I don't think I did anything today other than just listen to people or, correct some things, but we didn't actually decide anything. We didn't progress anything, but they're paying me pretty well to do this, so.
That would never fly in one of my meetings.
Yep. But
I kind of look for people who are not paying attention, and then I just ask them, like, so what do you think? Just to catch them, and they have to admit, like, I wasn't paying attention.
But this is pre-video call days. Like, you could do that, but it was far from normal. It was always conference calls. That's what it was. So I kid you not, most of my day was spent on mute, walking laps around the building. That's what I did. Yep. So got my steps in a lot. That's the way it goes. All right, let's jump into today's book, which is a national bestseller, despite some people's opinions of it. It's The 48 Laws of Power. This is by Robert Greene, and this is a monster of a book at, what did we decide, 409 pages? Is that what I have?
No, it's 430.
No. 430, there you go. Yeah.
Plus another 200 some in the margins.
Oh, yes. I did my best to read all of this. So what Mike's referring to is there's the main portion of the book, which is the 430 pages, but the margins are wide enough that you can write in them, which is handy, except for the fact that there's a lot of times when they fill them with like poems or short stories or quotes or all sorts of stuff. And if you want to read all of that, there's 200 is probably an exaggeration, but maybe another 50 or 60 so pages worth of stuff in there. It's large. There's a lot in here. And this is a book that I know has been, I don't want to say divisive, but it's controversial in the aspect of why would I ever want to do a lot of these things? Or these are genius, I'm going to do all of these things. Like, it seems like people have one of those two reactions when I did some searching on it. But I know that you had some qualms with the size of this book, Mike. What was your initial reaction to it when you first started reading it?
Oh, man. Reaction when I first started reading it. I was apprehensive. It starts, well, let's talk a little bit about the structure because there are no sections. It's just the 48 laws.
Yep.
So what I noticed is with the first law, the same format is kind of used throughout. There is the summary of the law right below the law and like a title page for that section. And then generally there's like the origin and historical examples of it in action, and then the keys to the law. And at the end, there is a quote about the authority of the law, an image that goes along with it, and then the reversal of the law when you can go against it, kind of, most of the time. And right out of the bat, like in the first law, there are these stories which I started to document in my mind map. And after the first one, I was like, I give up.
Yeah, I did something similar. I wrote down the first one because what I like to do is, like, whenever I have those stories, I like to put them in my notes and make a link out of it, because then it'll tie to all the other places.
Yep.
And so I did that on the first one, but then I remembered when I was writing it in my note, that was like, okay, well, what was the date on that? Because sometimes I'll want to put the date on it. And when I did that, I had flipped somewhere in the middle, and it occurred to me when I had flipped through the book at the beginning. Thank you, Adler, for how to read a book. I was flipping through the whole thing and was remembering, like, okay, I've seen a lot of dates and stories. Like, let me just kind of flip through all of this, because by that point I had figured out some of the flow, like what you're talking about for each of these laws / chapters. And I quickly realized that this is a huge number of stories, and I think I remember one that overlapped. Like, one person was brought up twice, I think, and then a lot of them are all...
There's more than that. He actually does a pretty good job weaving stuff throughout the book. He'll reference a person and kind of assumes that you've read the previous anecdote about that person in previous laws. However, the style of these stories is very Ryan Holiday-esque.
Yep.
However, I feel like because they're all, most of them are like ancient history, I feel like he's filling in a lot of blanks with these. Like, just as an example, the first one that I jotted down, Nicolas Fouquet, King Louis the 14th's finance minister. He throws a huge party to honor the king. Instead, the king feels threatened, has him thrown in jail, replaces him with someone that wasn't a threat. That is a very convenient narrative that fits the law that he's telling you. But you can see that there is a lot of opinion in that story.
Yes.
And correct. I'm not saying that the story that he's telling around this is wrong, but I also think that there are multiple ways to view events that happen, and it's obvious he's coming at it from a singular perspective. I don't blame him for that, given the very clear objective of the book itself.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel like I wanted a whole bunch of notes about somebody's opinions on historical events. So I stopped capturing them after that and really just jotted down the principles and the big ideas of the laws that he was trying to tell.
That's ultimately what I landed on too. Something now that you're explaining, like, some of the threads, I didn't catch that, which is interesting to me, because I did not catch that there's some stuff that was, reiterated in names that came up multiple times, because in my head they were all like completely different stories. Some of that just might be that there's a lot of, and don't take this wrong, there's a lot of foreign names that I don't resonate with. Like, if you say Mike or John or Matthew, like, I can generally keep those apart. Chinese names, I struggle to do that with.
Yeah, there's a lot of French and Chinese history in this.
Yep. So because of that, it like all fell together, and it's like, wait, these must all be different people, because he wouldn't reuse the same one. And that might be a misnomer. Like, I may not have connected that. So
yeah, he talks about Mao Zedong and Cao Cao a bunch. He talks about Napoleon multiple times. Marie Antoinette is one I saw a bunch of times. And after a while, I saw that he was really just building off of the stories that he was telling, adding a little bit more shading when he brought up their names again.
Sure.
But it's too much to keep track of.
It's a lot. It is a lot. Because, again, it's 48 laws, And depending on the law, he either starts with a success story of using this law of power, or a negative of what happens if you don't follow this. He starts with one of those two. But in most cases, you're getting one or two stories on both of those sides of the coin.
Yep.
Not always, but you generally do. And then when he explains it, he's going to give you a couple more.
Yeah, what I
So-
found confusing, by the way, is like the story, and then there's like the interpretation. But because
Yeah.
the stories are so opinionated, I felt like by the time I got to the heading of the interpretation, I rolled my eyes a little bit every time.
Yeah,
Like, you already gave me the interpretation.
right. Yes. But he doesn't want you to think of it that way.
Yeah.
He's inflicting one of these laws of power over you by doing it that way, I'm sure. So it's just how it goes. So, like we said, there's 48 laws here. We are absolutely not covering all of these. I wrote down 6. And we can go through those. If you want to add to that, Mike, go ahead. But before we do that, I think we need to talk about the preface / introduction of this particular book, because in this, he's kind of laying the groundwork for power itself. And these laws are basically power games. He kind of references that at the very beginning.
Yeah.
But during the preface, he makes a couple quotes here at the beginning. One of which of these is that the most important of the skills, or the talents that go into all these power laws, the most important of these skills and power's crucial foundation is the ability to master your emotions. Now, as we talk about each of these different laws, at least the ones that we're going to cover, I think it's fairly important to remember that whatever you're doing, you have to have control over yourself in order to do any of this. I think at the moment I'll let aside whether or not you should do this. And I say that knowing that whenever I looked this book up to do some research on it, I found an interesting stat that this was one of the most requested books in prisons for prisoners to read, which is an interesting thing to stick in the back of your brain whenever we're going through this. But
well,
anyway,
let me defend that a little bit, because I think the principles that he's teaching here, obviously just by the names, they're going to rub you and me the wrong way, but I don't think it's necessarily good or bad. I think his approach, what he would like to do with the book anyways, is have these principles be amoral. And I do think there is room to view power as amoral. Like, you could use it either way, just like money is a tool and you can use it for good or bad. I feel power is the same way, just maybe brand it a little bit differently. Okay, so maybe instead of power, maybe this is influence or leadership, right? Even I was talking with my discipleship guys about this last night. Leadership, we tend to think of that's a good thing, right? But people will have an aversion to sales. Why? Because they have this picture in their head of somebody using it the wrong way, the snake oil salesman who's trying to sell you a lemon of a car, right? But that's not all sales. Sales is really being able to sell somebody on an idea. And I told all my guys, like, you're all married, you sold yourself at least once.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And it was at church. I've mentioned Jesus was the best salesman that ever lived.
Yep. Oh.
That's what it is. But so we have this picture that's associated with it. And I think a lot of people, with something that they don't understand, like power specifically, they probably have a negative view of that. And you can take that negative view and be like, oh, I want that so that I can manipulate people. That's the example that you were kind of alluding to with the prisoners who want this book. But
yes,
I think everyone should want to understand the principles that are in this book. I'll just leave it at that for now.
Yep, totally fair. That's probably a good point to, let's just start diving into this. I think what we're alluding to will make more sense once we start talking through some of this. And I will say this, the laws that I've picked out to talk about are not necessarily the most controversial ones either. They're simply the ones that I feel like I'm most interested in, and that I feel like you would be the most interested in. It's not necessarily the ones that are the flashbang exciting ones.
Yeah,
They're
I
the ones
do
that I
have
feel
a
like tend to resonate.
I do have a couple more that I just jotted down, like examples and stories. We don't have to discuss the laws, but I'll interject those as we go
Sure.
in between here.
No, sounds good. So let's start with Law 1, because I feel like it's a good spot to start, which is never outshine the master. And he's got like these little paragraphs that come with each of these. I feel like it makes more sense if I read those. So I'm going to read this. Always make those above you feel comfortably superior. In your desire to please or impress them, do not go too far in displaying your talents, or you might accomplish the opposite, inspire fear and insecurity. Make your masters appear more brilliant than they are, and you will attain the heights of power. And this is one that I kind of wanted to bring up because I feel like this is something that some people do unintentionally, and it's a good one to be aware of. Like, this is one that I know, like, when you work in tech at a church, you are the expert on a certain area. So you can very easily accidentally outshine somebody who thinks they know tech pretty well. We've all dealt with folks like this that think they know a certain area, but then they don't. Or like when someone tells me that they know sound systems really well and they walk in and they want to, mix something, like, that's fine, go for it. But don't get upset if I come fix things, because I don't know you. I don't know if you know what you're doing. And if you have your electric guitar EQ'd like a bass guitar, it's going to be a bad day. So trying not to outshine someone is not always the
As a
easiest thing to
random
do.
hypothetical example.
As a random hypothetical that has never happened ever.
Yeah. So the big thing I think that you need to realize right from the beginning here, again, is that there are multiple ways to look at these things, and never outshine the master. Another way to say this, but you could say this about a lot of these different laws, is be self-aware, right? Don't make somebody else feel like an idiot.
Yeah.
And this is where, like, you use the church example. I think the church is one place where people maybe could benefit from understanding the other perspective here. So the way he so explicitly states this, like, never outshine the master, realize you can outshine the master simply by being yourself. Never imagine that because the master loves you, you can do anything that you want. The big thing I took away here, though, is that it's okay to let others outshine you. You don't have to say everything that you want to say. Even if it's true, you don't have to say it. And that's the thing about all of this stuff. You mentioned like the self-control in the introduction. Essentially, all of these laws, strategies, if you want to use this as the manipulation handbook, right, is exercising, because I'm sorry, I use that term because I've heard other people describe it that way.
Yep.
So
You're not necessarily wrong.
yeah, that's
So,
the dark side of this, that people who have an issue with this book, that's how they describe it, right? Because they see how other people have applied this stuff for manipulative purposes. And yeah, you can totally see how that would work, because it's all based on how humans are wired. But the big thing that, if you're going to take that approach, all of these laws are simply exercising self-control long enough to get what you want. That doesn't have to be manipulative, though. You can apply these laws, I think, to get what you want in a way that doesn't necessarily mean that it hurts the other person or they don't get what they want. I think there's win-wins here. However, it's not really told that way, because almost every one of these laws is like, this person did this and then they got power and then they killed the other guy.
yep. And then that became a repeating pattern, and then somebody finally had to break it. There's those patterns that happen a lot, right?
Yep.
But this is also, I think about like my corporate days when I was doing data analysis, and one of the things I would do is take a lot of the data and whatever results we had come up with and put them into slide decks for my superiors to then use in their presentations. And it was always a thing that did me a lot of good if I made those very flashy and very well done, because then it made my boss look like a genius, even though I know I did all the work. I got all the data put together. I ran the reports. I took it all and made it into a pretty slide deck, and then I handed it all off. And he goes and does a presentation with my 40 some hours worth of work and looks like a genius in the process. So if I can do that and he looks good, then he's excited and wants to keep me around because I make him look good. So if I don't ever try to outperform him or try to say, well, I'll present it, like, no, that's not the point. So
this is an
now
interesting
I don't really do
one
that today, but
this is an interesting one for me because my official title in the day job is a second in command.
Yeah.
So like I have to walk this line all the time. And there'll be times where it's like, it's clear to me what needs to be done, what needs to be said. But I recognize that I'm not the one it should be coming from. So I talk to the CEO like, hey, do you see it this way? Yeah, I do. Okay, well, this is what you should do. Okay, yeah, I'll do that.
Yep.
And I'm fortunate that we've got a good enough working relationship that's, I don't know, there's no politics in that, but yeah.
Politics are fun, right?
There's another one I want to jump into here though before we get to law 17, and that is law number 7. Just real briefly, this one is get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit. And like these law titles are terrible. However, I will give you a practical example.
Or are
of
they
this.
genius?
No, this one I don't like. Like the way it's stated, but I apply this one, and I'll tell you how.
Okay.
So long time ago, I used to play Carcassonne all the time with Tan at Asian Efficiency, a couple other people, Brooks, and there was another guy, Scott, that lived in the Austin area. And Tan was a ruthless Carcassonne player. Carcassonne is a board game where you get points for completing cities and roads and things like that. And you can like start building a city and then end up sharing it with somebody. So Tan's strategy was always get in on something, share it with somebody, and then never complete it. Let the other person complete the city and you split the points. And in the meantime, you go build something else on the side. It's genius. And I've adopted that strategy myself. It means that I almost always win whenever I play with my family.
Well done, Mike, I think.
So that's a non-nefarious way that you could implement one of these laws. Board games.
Sure. I know that like there's also like with stuff, and I have to watch this one a little bit because sometimes I want to give credit where credit's due. And I don't think that's necessarily bad. So like that's the reverse of this one, right? Yeah. And I'm aware that, my assistant tends to do a lot of legwork for me and will do things like setting up a stage, building entire scenes on our soundboard. Like he will do a lot of that for me. And then I walk in and run the event. And then whenever they do the things at the end and thank you for this person and they point at me and say thanks to Joe. But I'm not the one with a microphone, so I can't also say, and it's also my assistant here. Like I can't say that. So I end up taking the credit for things that he has done. Now he's aware of this, and we've talked about it before. It's like we're behind the scenes. If people notice what we're doing, we're not doing our job. Like that's that whole thing we talk about. So he's aware of that. I make sure I applaud him where I can, but I end up doing this inadvertently. So it's not necessarily bad in every case, but playing board games is probably an easy one to take full advantage of a lot of these.
Yep. Board games are like a microcosm of society.
There you go.
You can learn a lot from playing board games with someone.
You may not want to either. All right, let's look at Law 17. And there's a specific story on this one that I want to kind of tell you about. But anyway, Law 17 is keep others In suspended terror, cultivate an air of unpredictability. Again, I know you don't like some of these titles, but they're kind of fun, honestly, in a morbid sort of way. The paragraph underneath of this: humans are creatures of habit with an insatiable need to see familiarity in other people's actions. Your predictability gives them a sense of control. Turn the tables, be deliberately unpredictable. Behavior that seems to have no consistency or purpose will keep them off balance, and they will wear themselves out trying to explain your moves. Taken to an extreme, this strategy can intimidate and terrorize. And there's a story in here. This is from 1972. This is what he would call the observance of the law. And he's telling the story of a couple of chess champions. So Boris Spassky and Bobby Fischer.
Yeah.
And I think this is an awesome story. Let's see if I can get the two set up correctly here. But Fischer, these two were supposed to face off, right? And this is the World Championship of Chess that they're talking about. So they're supposed to face off against each other. Fischer is like not showing up. He's late. He's not responding to things. He's just being unresponsive, which is very out of character for him. Spassky is being very impatient, cannot wait to start this, and is becoming very anxious about it. There's a big to-do about it. Eventually, Fischer does show up, and then shows up late to the actual event itself. Spassky's like, come on. So then they finally,
almost gets
after a bunch of to-do, yeah, he almost gets disqualified. So he shows up last minute, and they do the first match, and Fischer loses because he makes some weird off-the-wall move that he can't recover from, which is, again, completely out of character for him. And the thing you need to know about these types of championships is once you've lost the first game, it's actually very difficult to come back from that. And if you lose the first two, which he did because he didn't make it in time for the second one and got disqualified for the second game, if you lose the first two, it is like almost unheard of to come back and win it.
Yeah, so real quick with Bobby Fischer, he's a weird dude. So actually, this is normal for him.
Okay, maybe now. The way it was pitched is he didn't used to be.
Yeah, so I guess I'm adding maybe some more context here to the story because I grew up playing chess. Played in like the tournaments. I had the ELO ranking and all that. I was never like grandmaster. I was not going to compete in any of these tournaments.
Yeah.
But Bobby Fischer was popular when he had just written a book when I was in middle school and high school. So everybody, like, he was the hotness, but he was always really, really strange.
Yeah. So he's starting to play these games and he's like making bad moves, but then winning. And he does this whole throw him off thing to Spassky so much that Spassky starts like going nuts, thinks that Fischer is hypnotizing him, thinks there's something in the chairs or in the food, like thinks that they're like playing mind games with him. And ultimately, Fischer wins because didn't Spassky resign? Yeah, he resigned. And then, even though he was still young, he never fully recovered from that defeat. Now, this is exactly what he's getting at here. He's like keeping others in suspended terror, cultivating an air of unpredictability. Like if you're continually throwing things off and you're not following a set pattern, people have no idea what you're doing. So then trying to, now again, this is when you're in the middle of doing like power moves, right? That's when this would apply, because if I were to do this to Mike when it comes to recording times for Bookworm, like what does that gain anybody? Like the unpredictability of Joe's schedule, which is probably more unpredictable than Mike would like, but I'm not this bad, I don't think.
You're no Bobby Fischer.
No, I hope not.
Yeah, this is interesting. So chess players in particular, I mean, I grew up around chess players, so I was one. Am one? I don't know. We actually have in our living room right now one of those, like, you can hang on a wall chessboards. They're for like clubs and classes where you can teach people like from famous games and things like that. So
Sure.
we have this thing set up in our living room. And whoever it happens to be playing, they'll just like make one move when they're walking by, and then another person will come and they'll make the other move. So games take days to complete.
Sure.
But chess players are very smart in specific ways, and if you get them outside of their comfort zone, they don't know what to do. So this other guy that Bobby Fischer was playing, Spassky, I think he said his name was. I didn't jot down the names. He is very good at what he does inside of this little bubble, right? And then Bobby Fischer just walks in and pop.
Yep.
Now he's totally discombobulated. I think there's another lesson to be learned in this chapter. I mean, obviously, this is written from the sense of the 48 Laws of Power. So you can assume the upper hand by being unpredictable, but also be a little bit flexible, and then you won't get so upset. Like, he picked an example, an extreme example, obviously for the illustration purposes of this particular law. And we can all relate to this a little bit, but I think we can all deal with it maybe a little bit better than Spassky did. It doesn't have to be completely demoralizing and cause you to go insane.
Yeah, and it is an interesting story because like Spassky was known for being able to calculate and plan moves like 30 and 40 moves out, which was significantly more than Fischer was able to do, and Fischer knew that. So came at it from a completely different strategy. So he's employing this very well, and he held the upper hand in the match from day one, well, even before day one, whether Spassky knew it or not. Didn't matter, but he eventually won out because of that.
Well, that advantage that you're talking about there, like that's all based on predictability, right? And as a chess player, it's really satisfying to tell my boys like, "Hey, mate in 4." They're like, "What?"
Yeah.
Like, no, just watch. 4 moves later, you got him.
Yep.
But Fischer comes out of the box with like these moves that no one in their right mind makes, and it totally disorients Spassky, and it forces him to completely change the way that he's thinking. He can't predict things anymore.
Yes. Now this is one of those that I don't really know. There's a lot of these. I should preface this. I don't really know how you would use this in a positive way in day-to-day. There's a lot like this. Like, I don't think I ever want to do that. Like, that is so deceptive. I don't think I could bring myself to do that. So there's a lot of these. Now, I also am aware, like, if you can see it through the right lens, it does have positive sides to it. But that's not always easy to see throughout this book, at least not for me. I feel like I'm usually pretty good at that, but I struggled with it on this one.
This isn't necessarily positive, but let me give you a I don't know. I don't think it's really that big a deal if you were to employ something like this. Let's say you're part of a group, right? And there's a established time. Everyone's going to be here at this time. Hypothetical example here. And you are the one who is always on time, and the rest of the group, 60 to 70% of them, about 75% of the time, always show up 15 to 20 minutes late, right? Standard protocol. I'm running even a few minutes late. I'm going to tell everybody, hey, I'll be there, whatever time. I'll be a little bit late. I think it's good for the group every once in a while for me not to say anything and to show up late like everybody else.
Why?
Just to well, number one, I guess, is it's easy to see what other people are doing, but you can't necessarily see what you're doing, right? So if you're trying to talk to these individuals like, hey, it's really important, you're on time. Yeah, I understand. But they just never do it. Like, shock to the system when somebody does it to them, now actually they realize, oh, this is a jerk move that I've been doing every single week.
Sure.
Right. And I'm not saying like just do this, but as a tactic, like if words aren't working, maybe something like this does. And in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big a deal. 15 minutes, right? Whatever. The other thing I think is it forces a conversation. So I'm never the one to shy away from conflict, right? But I get sick of being the one who's like, hey, this is what we all agreed upon over and over and over and over and over again. So if you have implicitly said we're not going to play by these rules anymore, fine. I don't play by them either then. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's redefine the terms of engagement here, right? So I don't know. Is that manipulative? Maybe. I guess you could frame it that way. But I also don't think, like, if you are trying to talk to people and people aren't willing to talk or nothing actually changes, sometimes you need something that's a little bit more shocking to the system. And this is one of those things that's shocking to the system, but I don't think it necessarily needs to be completely disruptive or destroy a relationship sort of a thing. Just like, whoa, that's weird. Mike's usually here 5 minutes early. Where is he?
Yep. It's totally fair. I think what you're talking about there, like, fine, I'll be unpredictable in this case. That also plays into, and I don't have this one on the outline, but Law 22, which is use the surrender tactic and transform weakness into power. It's kind of what you're talking about. It's like, fine, you want to play by those rules? I'll play by those rules. Like, I'll surrender to that. And like, there's a policy at work right now that they're implementing. I'm not going to explain it, and I'm not going to explain what I'm going to do, but I'm basically like, fine, you can put that policy in place. I'll play by that rule. I don't think you understand the ramifications of that rule, but I can now be unpredictable, kind of like what you're saying, because you decided to put this policy in place, which I think is a very bad policy in general. But if you see it on the surface, it doesn't appear that way, but it has ramifications on down the line. I kind of wish I could talk about it, but we're in the very depths of this at the moment, so I'm not going to say anything right now.
Yeah, that's fine. And I just want to like reiterate here, these are amoral, these laws, these tactics, right? So you could, even the exact scenario that I described, like I could go into it with the attitude of, oh, I'm going to stick it to this person, and that would be wrong. But if it's just, you know what, it's not that big a deal. I'm in the middle of something, and would I normally just like absolutely kill myself in order to be there on time because I made the commitment? Yeah, I would, because that's my personality. But I might decide, it's really not that important, as evidenced by other people's behaviors. So I'll be okay with letting that boundary get a little bit softer, and that is, I'm not doing a very good job of explaining this, but I feel like it's very important, the attitude that you go into this. I'm not trying to hurt somebody. I'm not trying to like damage them. I'm not trying to kill anybody like the examples in this book, but I could still use the tactic without the negative ramifications of it. I think it's possible for each and every one of these for it to be like a win-win sort of a thing. You got to get a little bit creative maybe with the execution of it, but it's possible.
Yes. This is why I brought up at the very beginning that one of the most important skills that's crucial to power is mastering your emotions.
Yep.
Like, this is why I brought that up, because if you go through these, it's very easy, like, take this policy thing. It's very easy for me to get upset about it, complain, moan, whine. Like, I could do that. Or I could play by the rule and let them see the results of that rule and try not to get all emotional about it. Now, do I want to get emotional about it? Yeah. I think it's a terrible idea, and I think everybody should know about it. But I'm not gonna go find a bunch of coworkers and collude together and complain about it. It's like, no, I'll just bite my tongue, go along for the ride, be okay with that, and just let the actions do the speaking in this particular case. Like, that's kind of the route that I'm going with it. But this is the application of something like what he's referring to in these laws, just not with the results of somebody being beheaded in the process.
Yeah, so I know we're not talking about the one that's actually on the outline yet, but let's just continue this. Use the surrender tactic, right? So there's this policy that goes forth, and you're emotional about it because it's going to make it harder to do your job the right way. Well, you could like say your piece and eventually disagree but commit. You lose that battle. They go ahead with the policy anyways. Just stick to the policy and don't, like, your job will suffer because of it. So they will feel that. right? You'll have to cut corners. You won't be able to do things the same way that you used to. Hypothetical example, but eventually they'll come to you. They'll come to you and be like, "Well, why aren't you able to do this?" Like, because this is the policy. So this is the way I have to do things, and I just can't do it the way I want to do it anymore. Oh, okay. Well, now you've got the upper hand.
Correct. Yes. You've now inflicted this pain upon yourself. You just didn't realize it. So, yeah. So the actual law that I have in the outline is Law 23. I just came up short on 22 there, which is concentrate your forces. The paragraph here, conserve your forces and energies by keeping them concentrated at their strongest point. You gain more by finding a rich mine and mining it deeper than by flitting from one shallow mine to another. Intensity defeats extensity every time. When looking for sources of power to elevate you, find the one key patron, the fat cow who will give you milk for a long time to come. This is interesting to me for a number of reasons. One, if you want to think about terms of power and like trying to gain an upper hand in some scenario, is something as simple as like a policy at work, or maybe it's a relationship online. I don't even know what that would be. But if you're thinking about these things, it pays, if you follow this thought process, it pays to think about it long enough to decide what is the one place that would have the full impact and have the ability to carry me in perpetuity without having to spread myself thin. And can I focus all of my energy on that one place? That's essentially what he's getting at here. And he's not wrong in that, because I can think of all sorts of times whenever I've spread myself too thin and ended up with myself spread too thin and got nowhere, when I would be better off focusing on one direction and coming out at the other end with some form of success instead of a whole bunch of failures, littering the field behind me. So I think this is a good one to keep in mind, but it's also one that, like, if you redirect what he's getting at, it doesn't have to necessarily mean, power plays, but it can be applied elsewhere.
Yeah. So when I read this one, I thought of online writing, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah.
So we mentioned before the call, I've been following the Ship 30 for 30 stuff for a while, and I understand why maybe those guys, their personalities rub people the wrong way, but the stuff that they talk about is really good. One of the courses that they have inside their captain's table thing is become known for a niche that you own. And it's all about becoming like super, super specific. And really all of the different webinars and things that they do, they just walk people through, like, get more specific. Okay, so now you've got your niche, and now you can generate ideas that you want to write about or create content about. And one of the mistakes that everybody makes, and I've done this myself, is they try to get too broad. And one of the reasons that you would get too broad is because you see somebody else who is doing something in a specific area, and you say, I want to be like that person. And productivity is the easy one. Who would you say is the productivity guy? If you had to pick one person on the internet.
If I had to pick one person on the internet?
Everybody that's alive today, who's the productivity guy?
I'm probably a little biased at the moment, but not going with my bias and going off of history, everybody typically would think of David Allen.
Exactly. And that's why I asked you, because I knew you were going to say David Allen. He's the productivity guy. There's never going to be anybody else who can brand themselves as the productivity guy. He owns that, right? But I can get more specific. I can be the faith-based productivity guy, right? But the tendency is, well, I don't want to talk about faith-based productivity necessarily, because there's stuff that's important to me that doesn't necessarily fit inside that container. And the trick is just figuring out how it does. But if you don't take the time to figure that out, you end up going broad. Like, I want to talk about this thing and that thing and the other thing, and there's no unifying thread between them, and nobody knows what the heck you stand for. So no one ends up following you, because if you try to stand for everything, you'll be known for nothing. I think that's how the saying goes.
Yeah.
Like you got to pick something. And that to me is concentrating my forces, identifying what is the niche that I want to create stuff for. And then everything has to tie back to that. And if I'm going to make a difference, if I'm going to build an audience, if I am going to have an impact in people's lives, it's going to be because I was able to concentrate my forces in a specific area and didn't let myself get spread too broad. And with my situation, specifically yours too, we're not full-time creators. We got day jobs, right? So there's limited time that goes into these things. They have to connect. If they don't connect, like, what the heck are we doing here?
Correct.
It's a waste of time.
Yep. This is one that, like, this is partly why you don't see me writing really at all right now, because I can do Bookworm and I can do my day job, but Bookworm has its own niche, right? So we're doing the productivity, self-help business books, and we have our cadence with that, right? When it comes to writing, like, I can do the Mac OS tech productivity thing. There's a lot of people that do that. I don't really have a way that I'm different per se in that, but I also know that that's only one very small piece of the interests that I would rather explore. The problem is, this is why I'm like trying to nail down what this actually looks like, is that, like, I like the pen and paper world, I like the tech productivity thing, but at the same time, like, I really, really enjoy boiling sap or building cages for quail and trying to get a little quail thing going up. Like, I would love to somehow incorporate those things, but it doesn't really fit. Like, they're so diverse that it's hard to tie that stuff together. Now, you can make the argument that Joe just hasn't taken the time to figure out the common thread amongst those things and then become that person. And that's very likely a big part of it. But at the same time, like, I need to know what is that arena that I want to explore and make that the thing. But I don't know what that is right now. So that's partly why you don't see me writing really at all. I write a lot for myself. And were I to nail down what that arena is, there's probably a ton of content I probably already have, just needs published, that I could release. The trick is that right now it doesn't fit the audience that follows me based on what I'm known for, which is a bit fluid in itself. So a lot of people know me as the OmniFocus scripting guy, which is ironic considering I've not used it for I don't know how long. I still get questions. Even yesterday, I got a question. It's like, hey, can I get the JavaScript version of this OmniFocus script? I don't see that it's been updated in a while. It's like, that's because I haven't touched it in years. So apologies, but that's just how it is.
Right. Let me add one other tangential thought to this, because I feel like timing here is really interesting. You mentioned the Apple Tech stuff.
Yes.
And that's kind of what triggered this thought. With Apple Tech specifically, there are a lot of people who are leaving Twitter, which I continue to be on Twitter because I feel like it still has a lot of business value. And it's kind of a weird season as people who no longer need Twitter for business value because their audiences are big enough to find them other places have the luxury of leaving. But when they leave, there's a vacuum now. There's a void that you can fill if you continue to write and publish socially. So it's kind of a unique opportunity, I feel, where you still want to niche down. I mean, the thing that gives you the authority is that you get so specific, right? I have a little bit of authority maybe when it comes to the broad category of productivity. But when you combine the Bible college degree and teaching the personal management class, now I have a lot more authority as the faith-based productivity guy. So you still want to do that. But maybe there was somebody in the Apple Tech space, I don't know, who was doing a specific thing and you felt like it was just too crowded. You couldn't like make your claim there. Just make the stuff you want to make and publish it consistently. And I really believe there's never been a better time to get noticed, but you got to be strategic with it.
Yes. The trick is creating what you want, like whatever that area is, whatever that niche is. I don't feel solid enough to say that I know what that is.
Yep.
That's the problem that underlies that. So like the marketing side of it and like how I publish things and where that's at and how I go through that process, like I can nail that down all day long. Like I know what those avenues are, but the backside of it, if the like what we're talking about, like concentrate your forces. If you're concentrating on one small, super tiny niche, what is that? Because my brain is so scattered that like trying to get like this is why hobbies are a bad idea for me, because like I'll go do this hobby for a while and then like 2 months later we'll go on to the next one. And that's just, I have a hobby of collecting hobbies, as they say. So that makes it tricky. Like when I'm always jumping from topic to topic. Like, cool, that's fun. I've now learned how to handle all the voltage and amperage changes whenever you're dealing with solar panels and building your own lithium ion solar panel battery packs. Like I can tell you how to do all these things. Why? Like that doesn't fit the whole analog Joe productivity world at all, but I've been fascinated by it. So that's what I've spent my time on whenever I'm researching things. But that has nothing to do with really anything that pertains to Bookworm or stuff I've done. So whenever I have those seasons, the question is, well, then how do you find the common thread that underlies all that and focus on that? And I don't think I'm in a good spot right now to be able to nail that down. That's the hard part.
Joe Bulig, Renaissance man, modern day Leonardo.
Sure. Well, that said, let's go on to another law because it sounds like fun. Let's jump ahead to Law 29. And this is maybe kind of coinciding with what we were just talking about, but plan all the way to the end is what this is called. So Law 29, plan all the way to the end. Here's the paragraph underneath of that. The ending is everything. Plan all the way to it, taking into account all the possible consequences, obstacles, and twists of fortune that might reverse your hard work and give the glory to others. By planning to the end, you will not be overwhelmed by circumstances and you will know when to stop. Gently guide fortune and help determine the future by thinking far ahead. And this particular law, I feel like actually should be either towards the beginning or towards the end of the book. I'm not sure which one, probably at the end. Because in every single one of these laws, I think it's every single one, there's always the predicated notion that the person enacting the law knows what they're after. And like on a high level view, like everybody already knows the goal that they're trying to accomplish. Like when you're hearing about one of the ministers underneath of Napoleon, he had a mission that he was working on for years, and he had this goal that he was headed towards. And he didn't necessarily have the whole thing planned out to the end, but he did know, what the ultimate mission is. Maybe that comes up because we're here at the end of the year. And I know that a lot of people are thinking about mission and goals and stuff whenever January starts rolling around. So maybe that's why that jumps ahead to me. But just the concept of planning all the way in, that has a couple things that are required. Like if you're going to plan all the way in, number one, you need to know what you're shooting for. Like what is that goal? What is the ending that you're wanting to have accomplished? And two, you also have to have the ability to work yourself to that, I guess, is the way to put that. So if you're wanting to be a pro basketball player and join the NBA, like you have to have the ability to do that first. Like you can't just say, I'm going to go play in the NBA. If I said that right now, everybody should like join forces and make sure that I don't do that because it's a huge waste of time. Like don't do that. But all of this is dependent on knowing what the end should be, like what the outcome should be, and then working your way towards that. That's what building that plan all the way to the end is about.
I don't like this law. Goals are dumb. That's all I gotta say.
Cool. All right, let's go to the next one. So,
so the things I jotted down from this: most men are ruled by their heart, not their head. Most people have no concrete picture of their end goal. When you plan to the end, you won't succumb to emotion. I agree with all of those points in isolation. And he does use a lot of different stories of specific people who had specific goals for a really long time and all the things that they did in order to make that goal come to fruition. But when I read those, it reminded me of like winning the interviewing the winning team in the Super Bowl or the NBA championship. It's like, did you think that you were going to hear, oh yeah, we knew because we had a goal.
They all had the same goal,
everybody
but yeah.
else. So this is fine. You can talk about this principle, again, I think it's dangerous to talk about goals this way because it's not the thing that creates the success. Now, this book is interesting because these are essentially all different tactics that it's up to you to figure out when is the right time to use these different tactics. So there's an area of nuance that is often missed when it comes to setting goals, I feel, is like sometimes maybe the goal is the right thing in the right situation, but not all the time. And most of the time, I'm going to argue that habits and routines are going to be better than goals. There's going to be reversals for all of these laws. Well, most of these laws, actually.
Yep.
So I guess like in this context, it's actually kind of cool because I feel like this is different than most of the other times that we hear goals talked about, because it's essentially like one of the 48 different strategies that you could be using. But again, the way that he describes it and the way that you just described it, there's a bias associated with this. I forget which one this is. It's maybe a confirmation bias. Because somebody did this and they were successful, then I should do the same thing. I would caution people not necessarily. I do think if you were to plan all the way to the end, like he's describing here, I can think of a lot of scenarios where that would actually be really frustrating and maybe do more harm than good. So I just want to call that out. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that this is the wrong strategy. However, you got to know a lot more about the situation before you can assume that it is the right one.
I think you made an important observation here in that there's 48 laws. That does not mean you're using all of them at the same time.
It would be impossible. Some of them are contradictory.
They are. They absolutely are. Used in the right ways, these can absolutely contradict each other. Now, that's why some of the opinions I have about this book as a whole that I'll share later are what they are. But ultimately, like, you're picking these depending on the situation. Like, it's, and I know you used it kind of in jest, but the manipulator's manual that you're referring to, like, you could absolutely use this as a reference book to look back on. It's like, okay, here's a situation I'm dealing with, and I need to get to this end goal. Like, if I want to shoot towards that end goal, how do I get to that point? And I'm struggling to figure out how to do that. You could pull this out and, read through these laws and like, yeah, that's what I need to try for this. Like, you could absolutely do that. I don't know that that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
But having read it, it's going to be hard to get some of this out of my brain, which is probably a good thing in some areas, but in others, not so much. So
one other book, which maybe if people are familiar with this, adds some context for how you might use something like the 48 Laws of Power, is this book by Derek Sivers, How to Live. The subtitle is 27 Conflicting Answers and One Weird Conclusion. So this book explicitly is like, do this. And then the next chapter is do the opposite thing. And so it's written in a way that you can't just try to do all of the things. You have to think about when to implement them. And I love that style. It's classic Derek Sivers, so it's really, really good. But I feel like you kind of got to take the same approach with the 48 Laws of Power, even though it's not explicitly stated that way in this one.
Yes. Now, it is interesting that one of these is put together a plan. That's really it. Like, he's just telling you, it's like, if you're going to, become powerful, like, you need to not, like, you're not going to do it haphazardly. You need to be on a mission. So there's that. That's law 29. If we go to law 40, this one is fascinating to me for a handful of reasons. It might, no, I'm not going to say it's my favorite one, but it might be up there. But this is law number 40. Despise the free lunch. I have so many different areas I could apply this. Here's the paragraph. What is offered for free is dangerous. It usually involves either a trick or a hidden obligation. What has worth is worth paying for. By paying your own way, you stay clear of gratitude, guilt, and deceit. It is also often wise to pay the full price. There are no cutting corners with excellence. Be lavish with your money and keep it circulating, for generosity is a sign and a magnet for power. This was specifically geared towards finances. Like that's really what his chapter here is about. This law is about, and it's basically like pay your way and don't take something for free. Living in the attention economy, like that could absolutely apply to apps, to services, to all sorts of stuff at the same time. Like if you're not paying for it, well, how's that go? Like if you're not paying for it, you're the product.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of how that goes. So I immediately took it that direction. Now, obviously, that's Joe being privacy centered on this stuff. So that's where that comes from. But this is absolutely true, I guess, in a lot of cases. Whenever you see something that's for free, there's either someone, like if someone wants to buy you lunch, it's not necessarily a power move. It's possible they want information, which may just be learning about you and just trying to build a relationship with you. The question would then be, why do they want to do that? It's one thing this book taught me, is being skeptical is kind of his playbook here, is like, assume everybody's trying to get you. That's kind of the underlying theme here. But being the skeptic whenever you see something free is his point in this particular law.
It's kind of depressing, actually. By the time you get to the end, you're like, okay, can we move on? I'd like to have some hope in humanity again.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, one of the points he makes in this chapter, which I think was pretty profound, is that money is psychologically charged. So that explains a lot of people's view, I think, on that money is evil. They'll even misquote that Bible verse. No, it's not money that's evil. It's the love of money that is evil.
Yes.
Because it's replacing what you should be loving instead. It becomes an idol. But I think this is interesting. Despise the free lunch. One of the things that Rachel and I have documented from going through the book Life and Air, like Millionaire, but what does it look like if you have an abundance of life? It's really just ways to start. Like if money was no object, how would you live your life, right? And then you kind of work backwards from there. And are there elements of that you can implement now? One of the things that we landed on was along the lines of the free lunch, right? And the generosity. We want to make people feel like $1 million, even if we don't have $1 million. That's the phrase we landed on. What does that look like? It means that when we meet somebody for coffee or lunch, most of the time, we're just going to offer to pay for it.
Yeah.
We're not doing that to manipulate somebody. Although I do think because money is psychologically charged, and you do so in that way, you will reap a harvest from that. There are a lot of times now where like people understand that that's our MO. And so when the bill comes, they'll snatch it before we even get a chance to be like, no, just one check, over here. Is that bad? Like, no, I wasn't trying to get that out of the person, but if they want to reciprocate, I'm okay with that. It reminds me of verse Proverbs 11:24 in the Message version says, the world of the generous gets larger and larger. It's kind of interesting to me because like a lot of these laws map up with these biblical principles.
They do. Yeah.
It's like,
if
this
you
is
can
not,
interpret them. Yes.
This is not new. I've been saying this for a really long time, but
yeah, I think there's a couple different ways to take this, right? So like what you're saying, despise the free lunch. Again, he's coming from a building power thought process. Like that's where he's coming from.
Because if you accept a free lunch, you owe somebody
Correct.
something, and that's
Correct.
bad.
Yep.
Supposedly.
In this construct of power and levels of power and who's at what level and who has power over whom, when you're in that structure, then you need to be wary of someone offering to buy your lunch, because the question is, are they trying to get power over you? Now, as you're saying, like generosity, when you're generous, your world expands. And some would say that that's absolutely what this law is getting at, because you're expanding your power because you've expanded your world. So that's absolutely playing into what he's calling on here. And yet, the way that he wrote this, it's like this is a negative, and that's not necessarily bad. Like taking a free lunch, like if you're on the receiving end of that generosity is what I'm referring to. If you're receiving that, it's kind of seen as that's a bad thing. So you don't want to do that. You want to flip the tables. But at the same time, like sometimes me being on the receiving side and doing that with honor to the person giving to me is exactly what I need to do to show respect to that other person. Right?
Well, I think this whole book is written from a scarcity mindset. And all the stories support that, because there can be only one king of France. There can be only one ruler of China.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
But the truth is that for anybody who is not the leader of a nation, success is not a zero-sum game. You don't have to lose in order for me to win. But I do think that based on the level that he's talking about these principles, that is a little bit different.
Yep, absolutely. I guess what I was going to say is that, if I'm accepting generosity from, say, one of my elders, it can be a sign of respect to that person if I'm accepting that free lunch, right? So I've had a couple people take me out to lunch. They've bought, and I know that accepting that is sometimes exactly what I need to do. There are times I offer to buy, but I weigh that depending on the situation, and I'm not going to be one that's trying to always do that just because I sometimes know that I don't want that persona. For some people, it works really well. So in your case, it might work really well to do that. I just know that with my personality, it doesn't fit to do it that way. So
sure,
it's just the way it is. Okay. Let's do law number 45. This is the last one I want to talk about that I wrote on the outline here. 45 out of 48. So 45, law 45, preach the need for change, but never reform too much at once. Here's the paragraph under this one. Everyone understands the need for change in the abstract, but on the day-to-day level, people are creatures of habit. Too much innovation is traumatic and will lead to revolt. If you are new to a position of power, or an outsider trying to build a power base, make a show of respecting the old way of doing things. If change is necessary, make it feel like a gentle improvement on the past. Yes, yes, and yes. This is right in my world, and it's because if I'm going to implement a new piece of software, that can be a major amount of change for somebody. And knowing how much to change at one time is key. So if I'm going to change a whole bunch of things at one time, it usually is not going to go well. You have to choose which ones are we going to change all at once. For example, I'm in the middle of rebuilding our church website. And whenever we're doing that, there are lots of ramifications and things that we could do to incorporate, which have trickle effects down through other areas of the organization. And if we do too much of that, everybody gets lost, doesn't know where to go to find a calendar, doesn't know where to go to do, you name it. And we have too many things that are mixed up and too difficult to locate. So we can't change too many things at one time, but we can set up the structure to allow us to change it over a couple of years. So that's exactly what we're doing in that case. In this particular case, has nothing to do with power, has everything to do with helping people go along for the ride and not causing problems. So maybe that's a power move, but I'm just trying to create less work for myself in the process. So this is purely self-preservation in this particular case.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned the tech stuff, but I feel like New Year's resolutions falls into this too.
Oh, no, it doesn't. You can change at least 6 things at once and it's fine, Mike.
Let's make this tech related. It's like trying to change your life OS.
Okay, yeah, sure. That'll work. That's a thing, isn't it? Life OS? Isn't that
probably,
an actual...
Yeah, I don't know. I guess you could argue that that's kind of what I do with the daily notes in Obsidian. Ding, there goes the bell, Blake. But the big takeaway here is I think you should not try to change a bunch of stuff at once, whether or not you're trying to get other people to move along with you or you're just trying to make changes yourself. This is the principle. But everyone wants the big changes. And one of the things I jotted down in this chapter is never let the seductive charm of an idea cloud your reason. Ed Cole said that the most powerful thing you can do is create an image. And this is why you might want a revolution. This is why people will attach to New Year's resolutions, is they have an image in their head of a different life. And they want the noun without having to do the verb. You don't really understand all the work that's going to be part of this. And if you really did, you wouldn't be choosing that, or you would run out of motivation before you actually got a chance to achieve it. And that ties into the one other thing that I jotted down from this for today, was going back to Law 32, play to people's fantasies. So I feel like these kind of go together. This is what productivity books do. They promise the revolution. They promise the sweeping changes, right? And that's not the true way to implement any sort of lasting change. But Law 32 talks about how change is slow and gradual. I wrote it down this way: suddenly never happens suddenly. But when you package it and you try to sell it in a form of a New York Times best-selling book, you want it to seem sudden. And then to bring power, fantasy must remain to some degree unrealized. So I don't know, it's just interesting to me. I'm reflecting on this book specifically and how it's probably leveraged several of these laws to get people to buy more copies of this book. The promise, I think, is that you're going to be able to have the upper hand in whatever situation you happen to be in. That's probably unrealistic. You can probably implement some of this stuff and get a little bit more leverage and have a little bit more control, and that would be a win, but that's not why people are going to pick up the 48 laws of power. It's going to be because they believe in the revolution and it's going to completely change their world, but probably not.
Or, people are picking it up because they're now in a new situation and there are people playing power moves and they're trying to figure out what's going on. Like, that's another way that you could come at this. But I have lots of thoughts on this overall. But
that is fair. However, I feel like if someone were doing that, I don't know. I understand that people are in bad jobs and bad situations, and you can't just have a conversation about it. But me personally, I don't think I would try the majority of these with the intention of I am going to manipulate this person so that I get a better situation. I think if I had to resort to any of these for any length of time, I would quickly be like, I'm in the wrong spot. I'm out of here.
Sure.
These are things that you can, like the one we were talking about earlier, where you do something unexpected and it kind of jars people and it forces, a look at what's really going on. But I don't know. I feel like I would get to the point where I would feel like there's no alignment here, and I would choose to remove myself from that situation long before I would really be able to leverage any of these laws to any real effect. But that's just me.
Yeah, I know that, just looking at the book holistically, and I went back and I skimmed through the preface after I finished reading this, and I did that because I didn't recall if he made the comment that we should play by these rules, like that he's making the claim that everyone should operate by these laws and should try to do these things. Because that's definitely the air that the whole book has as you're reading through that. Like, it seems like that's what he's calling for, but he never explicitly said that as you were going through the laws. So I went back to the preface because that's the only thing you have outside of the laws. He doesn't have a conclusion. He doesn't have like an explanation for a group of laws. He doesn't have that. So I went back to the preface, and he doesn't ever say, not that I found, he doesn't say that you should do these things. And he also doesn't say that these are all explicitly evil in their way, and he also doesn't say that they're explicitly good in their own way. It's just left open for you to make that decision, which I think you kind of alluded to this earlier, might be part of the power play he's taking here, because he's now made me an extreme skeptic of everything that he's doing. So I'm not certain that this is unintentional. I would assume it is intentional, but he even disqualifies the people who say this doesn't exist, because he's got a quote. I'm going to read this because this is funny to me, because he's quelling fears over this book before you ever get into it. This is what he says. To some people, the notion of consciously playing power games, no matter how indirect, seems evil, asocial, a relic of the past. They believe they can opt out of the game by behaving in ways that have nothing to do with power. You must beware of such people, for while they express such opinions outwardly, they are often among the most adept players at power. Okay, so even if you're going to say you're going to opt out, does that then make you one of the supreme power players? That's really what you're left with on that. So again, he's not telling you that you should or shouldn't do this. He's not saying that these are necessarily good or bad, but that these do exist. And I think Blake kind of mentioned this in the chat early on. It doesn't matter if you like these or don't like them. And like what we were saying, we may not like the way that they're expressed. Like the terminology behind them may not necessarily be the way that we would term it, but this is the way things work. Like a lot of people play by this playbook. If you think of all the political campaigns, the candidates are playing by these rules constantly. Like they're always doing these things. So that doesn't mean that they're right. Like doesn't mean that they're a good person, but that's what they're doing. So I don't really know where I'm landing on the I'm going to use this versus I'm not going to use this. This is why I'm kind of stalling on getting to action items. But
well, let me influence you maybe a little bit here, because I agree. In isolation, it's hard to tell, what does he really think about this stuff? How should you be using this stuff? However, look at the rest of the body of work.
Yes.
His blog is called Power, Seduction, and War.
Yes. Yes.
He's written the Art of Seduction, the 33 Strategies of War, and then a couple of books which actually sound kind of decent. The Laws of Human Nature and Mastery. However, I don't want to read the other ones.
Yes.
Does that make me a non-willing participant in the game? Maybe, but I'm okay with that.
Yes. That's the part here that is a bit dicey, and maybe why this is such a divisive book. This is why some people absolutely love it. This is why some people think it's terrible. But at the end of the day, and I'm kind of transitioning into action items here, knowing that I get to go first on this, like I'm not real sure what to do with this, because there's a lot here that, again, if I think back to working in a number of like consulting roles and being in different headquarters for different companies, these things happen a lot at the levels that I was participating in. And I sensed, like I could tell that certain things were happening and that power plays were happening, but I couldn't necessarily tell you what they were trying to do or why they were doing certain things that seemed so strange. And looking back on those situations and replaying some of the moments that I remember in meetings that left me completely flabbergasted that somebody would do something, it's like, oh, that's this law. Oh, that's what they were doing. Like things started to click. I also don't know that those people knew what they were doing. They just kind of intuitively knew what was going on. So maybe they knew they were playing a power play. Maybe they didn't. I don't know. But you could kind of tell what was going on, and this has kind of crystallized some of that for me. As far as like what to do with this, like as far as action items go, I have one, and it's primarily because something that comes up a lot. This isn't necessarily a specific law, but it comes up in a number of them. In that, trying not to share too much information too early or at all. So basically, the way I wrote it down, you'll appreciate this, Mike. I wrote it down as bite my tongue. That's what I wrote it down as. Just because like I tend to, share too much about situations. Now, obviously on Bookworm, like that's the point, but in day to day, that's not necessarily the point. And sometimes I feel like it's becoming a problem in certain relationships. So bite my tongue. The unknown is better than the known negative in a lot of cases. So that's one thing that I've kind of collected from the bank of these laws. So again, I don't really know what else to do with that other than just be aware of it. I in a lot of cases, I don't want to use some of these laws. In other areas, like, oh yeah, I use that all the time. Like, interesting. So it's kind of eye-opening, but it's definitely got me looking at things like a skeptic. So I'm not sure the net outcome is positive here. So anyway, I just have the one action item. Did you come up with any out of this?
You have one more action item than I do.
Okay. See, I win. I have more points than Mike on the action items list.
Yeah. We'll talk about the book in Style and Rating. I thought it was a fascinating read, but there's nothing from this that I wanted to implement a specific way. I think a lot of it is information that may or may not prove useful in the future. There's definitely some things that I wanted to talk to you about, which were cool, but not a traditional Bookworm style action item to be found in here for me.
Yeah, totally fair. All right, so for Style and Rating, I will say that his style here is pretty engaging, actually. Like I know that I said earlier that the stories were hard for me to keep square with each other, and I'll stand beside that because I did not connect a lot of dots between different stories. Maybe that's a factor of it's just being long and I got tired. Maybe it's a factor of the names didn't connect with me. Not sure what that was, but the format that he has for each of these laws, like observance and I can't think of what the other term was. Basically, it's whenever you use it, the transgression. That's what it was. Whenever you use the wrong one. So if you observe the law, certain things happen. If you transgress the law, this happens. And then he'll do like the keys to power, the interpretations. Like I kind of like that flow. You're not wrong in saying that he's interpreting a story and then interpreting his interpretation of the story. You're not wrong in saying that. I just hadn't connected that that's what was going on until you said it. So I like that he has the same format for each of them because then it allows you to kind of compare law to law, knowing that you're not going to use all of them at once. So he's great at telling the stories. There were a lot of times I felt like I kind of want to skim this so I could be done with this book, but I really couldn't because every time I went to the next law, it's like, oh, this is a fascinating story. Like he's done that so many times going through this. I'm fairly certain that Ryan Holiday was his research assistant. Can anybody confirm or deny that?
I believe so, yeah.
So I'm pretty sure there's a connection between those two. Which makes perfect sense.
There is a connection. They actually just did a webinar together, I believe.
Okay. It makes sense. Blake says it's true. So it makes sense to me because if you look at like how Ryan Holiday puts together stories that you really don't know, this is absolutely what this is. I don't know that there were really any of these stories that I knew at all. There was maybe a couple that I knew about, but not in the level of detail that he shared. So maybe that means I'm not widely read. Don't know what that means. But that all said, as far as like the book itself, should you read it? What do we rate it as? It's one of these that I think long-term, this is one that I'm going to be glad that I have read. I am not sure that this is one that I want to read again or come back to because it makes me feel kind of icky. It's a technical term for those of you out there. The trick with this one is that it's positioned in a way that comes across very negative, and in order to find the positive, which I tend to prefer, you have to do some interpretation. It's not always the case, but in most cases that seems to be what you need to do. So as a book, and as far as an encouragement, if you're going to read it, I don't find that that's the case because like you were saying, when you finish reading it, it's like, okay, I'm glad I'm done with this. And there's not really any resolution to the negatives that I feel like I've worked through. At the same time, knowing about these different tactics and methods that people can use to climb the power wall, if you will, it tells me that there's a lot of stuff that happens, whether people realize they're doing it or not. I'm not sure, but you can become aware of these things being used against you. Now, what you do with that, I think, is up to you. But in my case, like, I'm probably going to let things lie in a lot of cases. Not always, but it would be good to be aware of these things. So I'm kind of glad that I've been through this now, just to understand that construct a little bit more. Helps me see some of my history in a different light, so I'm very grateful for that. As far as rating goes, it's weird. Like, this is kind of a weird book. I feel like we say that every time, though. It's far from a 5, in my opinion, but I also feel like it's got some value to it. So I'm going to put it at 4.0 because I feel like there's a lot of good that you can learn from this. But at the same time, like, you got to come at this with a side eye, I think. And if you're well read prior to going into this, I think you'll be in good shape. If this is one of the first nonfiction books you pick up, you're probably getting slapped in the face with this one. So I feel like you got to have some background before you get into it. So 4.0, that's where I land, Mike.
All right. Well, I will say I was pleasantly surprised with the stories. I don't think there was a single story in here that was a slog to read. They were all pretty fascinating. So very, very good storyteller. However, the rest of the premise of the book made me uncomfortable. I am glad to have read it. I don't think this is one you have to read. I don't think I would necessarily recommend this one for the bookworm audience. I don't know. Maybe time will prove me wrong. Maybe the further we get from this, the more value it has. A la How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler. Maybe I'll keep realizing that I heard about this and this book and keep coming back to it, but I kind of don't think that's the case.
Yeah.
You mentioned that it made you feel icky. I'll say it this way. You get done with this one, you want to go take a shower. I feel the perspective that is communicated here, whether intentional or not, is not a healthy one. If you are going to look around every corner and assume that everybody has it out for you and try to figure out who's using what laws of power against you, and then getting upset that they're doing that and trying to turn the tables and actually manipulate them instead, that sounds like a miserable life. And I have no interest in that whatsoever. I also mentioned the perspective of like the scarcity mindset as it pertains to the power dynamics that he's describing here. Maybe I'm not setting big enough goals. Maybe I don't aspire for enough greatness, but I don't really want to be the president of the United States or the king of France or anything like that. So I have a hard time believing that there's if I am to be successful, somebody else can't be, which is the prevailing thread throughout this entire book. So I don't really think that's great either. I do think there's some good stuff in here. Like I said, the stories are great. I do like the perspective of like, these are all the different laws and you got to decide for yourself where you're going to use them. I do like the fact that at the end of every section, there is a reversal. There was one where the reversal section was, there is no reversal for this law. I forget which one that was.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, there was one of them.
But for the most part, it's talking about how, here's where you want to use it. Here's where you don't want to use it. Like you said, there's that when you obey it, this is what happens. And when you go against it, this is what happens. So a lot of good context, a lot of content here. I feel like the stuff in the margins is pretty fascinating. It's all like different fables and anecdotal stuff where it kind of ties into the main topic, but not directly. I gave up trying to keep up with all of that stuff, though, to be honest, as I was getting through it.
It's a lot.
Yeah, I do think it's probably a pretty good reference work. Like, I'm glad I've got this one in my library. However, when people are coming over and they're asking like, hey, you have any recommendations? What should I read? I have a hard time thinking I will ever recommend this one.
Yeah.
So better than I expected. Not great, in my opinion. Really just I chalk that up to difference of philosophical opinion between me and the author here. I'm not surprised you rated it 4.0. I do think there's value here. However, I'm going to rate it at 3.5.
Totally valid. 7.5. Okay, let's put it on the shelf. What's next, Mike?
Next is another laws book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell, the updated version, by the way, because this book has been around for a long time. This is one of those, like, well, it's not a classic book like Stephen Covey type classic, but it's been around for a while, and I did see that he updated it for like the 25-year anniversary or something this last year, and so I bought it, and this is one of those ones that I feel is going to be one that we point back to in the Bookworm library. I was kind of surprised that we hadn't covered this. I think we've both read it at different points, but we haven't covered it for Bookworm, and that's going to change.
Yeah. No, I went through this with a group of men 8 years ago. So I have the new version on the way. I think it's supposed to be at my house today, which would be good because I'm hoping to start it tonight. So looking forward to going through that one. Now, following that, I figured out how to pronounce this. I picked a book knowing that the beginning of the year is a time shortly after the one we'll cover this, but Ikigai is how you say this. Ikigai, Ikigai. It's The Japanese Secret to a Long and Happy Life by Hector Garcia. And this is basically, if you think about like all those Venn diagrams of passion, what you're good at, things you like to do, this is like that center section of all of those. So I know that this one is very highly rated and talked about in a lot of cases, in a lot of lists. So I kind of want to cover this one. I've been itching to do like a missions, passions, values, something book for some reason. And this kept coming up. I asked Mike before via text, like, what's like one of your best missions purpose book out there? And it's like, Hero on a Mission. I'm like, well, we already covered that one. Like, I can't, we're not going to do that one again. But anyway, I think Mike should write one. That's what I'm hoping for here. That's the goal. Anyway, so Ikigai is what's coming up after 21 Laws of Leadership. How about Gap books, Mike?
I'm finishing a Gap book that I had previously. We should definitely do something by this author, by the way.
Okay.
Someday is Today by Matthew Dix. This is a creative book, and it's pretty good. It's got a blurb on the very front. You know how like they'll have the blurbs from famous people? David Allen, Cal Newport, etc. This one is from Dr. Ali Abdaal.
There you go. Doctor. I like it. I sent you a picture of this, but I managed to get a pretty good deal on a couple of books, and I have one that I've been kind of like working through slowly. When I tell you what it is, that will make sense. But I've been like reading little bits of it here and there day by day. It's Tribe of Mentors by Tim Ferriss. I've been starting to kind of work through that. That one's going to take some time. That one's not going to be done in a couple weeks. That will take time. I should look up. It's like 600 pages. It's long. It's longer than the one we just covered. I know that.
Yeah, it's ginormous. And I believe this is essentially a book that was written by all the interviews that he's done.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty brilliant premise, to be honest. Just take all those interviews, package them up in a book form, and sell it.
Right. And it's an expensive book. I want to say it's $48, $40-something dollars. I found it at a used bookstore for like $12, and it was like in perfect condition. I was like, done. That's coming home with me. So that said, we're super grateful to everyone who has joined us on the show today, and especially those of you in the chat, and even more so those of you who have joined the Bookworm Club at club.bookworm.fm. See if I can get these words out of my mouth. And those of you who have joined the memberships, so much, we're just so grateful to you. It's a simple $5 a month, $60 a year. You get all kinds of cool perks. We talk about it all the time. But we're always grateful to have those of you join us on the show as well. And we're very grateful to those of you who do that to help us keep the lights on here for the podcast. So thank you.
All right. If you are reading along with us, pick up The 21 Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell, and we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.